Sekeres Price for July 1st, Canada Day, 2024. Happy Canada Day, everybody. We're coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. If you're thinking of hosting a company party, call the Wall Center, 604-331-1000. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price. Gritty Sass, hitting switches, conducting things. Big show coming up for you today on NHL Free Agency Day. The Vancouver Canucks have been very, very active. So let's get first and foremost to our poll question, asking you, how do you grade the Canucks in free agency? A, B, C, or other? You can do so at Sekeres Price on Twitter or X and on YouTube. Happy Canada Day to you. I hope you had a good weekend.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, it didn't feel like much of a weekend. Worked a game on Saturday, and then we're back at work here, but weather's starting to turn. I think there's great weather ahead. So, and hey, we have NHL free agency to talk about.
Sure do.
So
we sure do. Not going to go to an A letter grade, although I think this is another very, very good and responsible July 1st free agency day for this new Canucks regime. In fact, and I've been arguing this for a couple of weeks now, there's part of me that wonders whether they avoided a big mistake today on their trade targets or on their signing targets after both Jake Guentzel and Chris Tanev have their rights traded and sign with the team that acquires their rights. Of course, in Guentzel's case, that's with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and boy, what a weekend it was for that franchise.
Oh,
and in Chris Tanev's case, it's with the Toronto Maple Leafs on a deal that is raising suspicion here. More on that later in the program. But I was always about building depth, filling multiple spots on this hockey club. And you know, Guentzel at $9.5 million was probably going to prevent them from doing that. Now, as it stands, Blake, I think they're a little bit short still, that third pair on defense, but really good value contracts here for Kiefer Sherwood and for Danton Heinen, the two wingers, in my estimation, or the two sort of middle to bottom six wingers. Derek Forbort is their profile of defenseman. And then the huge signing of Jake DeBrusk. Look, it's a year or two longer than you would hope, but the top six scoring wingers were really dwindling up there. There was a whole lot of panic through Canucks Twitter earlier in the morning. And so having to give him additional term looks like it was a concession that the Vancouver Canucks made here. That all said, DeBrusk is amongst the youngest UFAs in this crop, and he fits the bill more than just a scoring, more than just a score. So I'm going letter grade B. Frankly, probably would err on the side of B+. I think this is a very good day for Patrick Allvin, Rick Tocchet, and the organization. And again, a responsible day where they didn't go and blow their brains out like some teams did today.
I'll give them an A because I think they were malleable. I think decisions got made for them. They were forced to go to plan B and C and D, and they did so rather gracefully. Jake DeBrusk has a very good defensive profile in addition to be able to, I don't think he's going to be a 30-goal scorer, but I think he can push it into the upper 20s. He's already got 27 goals. And for those that are worried about his 19-goal output from last year, go back the last couple of years, get a bigger sample size. And there's a guy in his mid-20s in terms of goal scoring. Maybe he could push 30, maybe. But even if he's just the player that we've seen over the last 3 years, that's a pretty good player at just $5.5 million. And you add to the depth of the bottom six with like Joshua, bringing back Joshua, Danton Heinen, Kiefer Sherwood. The bottom six is going to be pretty darn good this year. There's a hole on D. And to me, it's the only glaring hole on this team in terms of being able to challenge for a division title. Like, this is a playoff team that I'm looking at. But if you want to be a division titleist again, outside of everything going your way like it did this past year, I think there's going to have to be another defenseman brought in here.
I would add middle six forward. We will get to what's left to do here for Allvin and company as we go forward. But let's get to our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, and Foolish Winery. Canucks salvage free agency after Guentzel and Tanev signed elsewhere, and exchange free agents with their old foe, the Boston Bruins. The Canucks signing 3 Bruins And the Bruins wind up being the landing spot for both Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. A shout out Irf Gafar, who mentioned to us last week on the show, Boston on Zadorov. It's a 6-year, $5 million deal for Zadorov in Boston. It is a $7 by $7.5 million deal for Elias Lindholm in Boston. More on the other signings around the National Hockey League. But first, Blake, on the top story, most interesting that we're trading players effectively with the Boston Bruins.
Well, at least they're sowing their oats elsewhere. It was just Calgary, Florida, and Chicago previously that they were apparently able to do transactions with. Not so add the Bruins. And, it just fits. It fit for both sides, and the price tag works for both sides. Boston had room to move, so they go in this direction, and they wanted that money spent down the middle rather than on the wings with DeBrusk. And the Canucks needed some burliness in Forbort and Heinen. Heinen gets to come home, local guy. So, you look at the deals around, folks, and these are really reasonable numbers as opposed to guys that we were hearing on the grapevine, like a Brendan Dillon, who goes for $4 million a year. Canucks can't pay that. That's an overpayment. And I don't know that there's a single AAV that's an overpayment on the Canucks. You can argue term under DeBrusk, although it should be said again, he is amongst a handful of the youngest UFAs available today. So if you're going to go 7 years, it's against the young guy. It's not a 29-year-old. He's a 27-year-old as we speak. So with no AAV overpay, and I feel pretty comfortable saying that, I think the Canucks are pretty happy.
Well, they had to pivot. They had to pivot several times here. It's kind of like the Friends episode with Ross and the couch going up the stairs. They pivoted several times after a lot of these free agents go off the board. We mentioned Gensel, and there's part of you that wonders whether Jake Gensel is a Vancouver Canuck today if Tampa doesn't make the extraordinary decision to lowball Steven Stamkos, and then when he refuses, move out Mikhail Sergachev and Tanner Jeannot in trades on the draft floor, clearing the cap space to be able to go out and sign Gensel after they trade for his rights. But, we talked about West Vancouver. Sam Reinhart was always a bit of a pipe dream. He goes for $8 by $8.6 million to re-sign with the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. That's the equivalent of about $11 million in BC because of the differences in tax jurisdictions there. We talked about former Canuck Tyler Toffoli. He winds up signing a 4-year deal at $6 million per in San Jose.
Just too much
of all places.
Just
I understand his wife, and they have California roots there, having lived and played in Los Angeles. But that's a 4-year deal for an older player. There's a lot of things that you like about Toffoli. We talked about it on Friday, that if you're looking at pure finishers for PD, then Tyler Toffoli would have been amongst the best in this crop, not named, Stamkos, Marchessault, Gensel, or Reinhart, but 32 going on 33 for Tyler Toffoli. So you'll be paying him past 35 years old. And as we've also talked about with Toffoli, while he's great in short areas, a good finisher and a smart hockey player, not the fastest player. The Canucks were looking for speed, and you wondered how his legs are going to age there. When the speed degrades even further, how effective Toffoli's going to be. Elsewhere, Stamkos and Marchessault to Nashville, who are one
Nashville
of the
Predators.
huge
My
stories
goodness.
here.
This is
not
Barry
only those
Trotz.
two guys, but Brady Shea as well, the free agent defenseman from Carolina.
Barry Trotz had to operate when he was a head coach with an internal cap that meant that year after year, he knew he would have 3 elite players, maybe 4 if you count the 2 defensemen and a couple of forwards, and elite goaltending. You have 5 players, and the rest were going to be underpaid and role players. He said, not on my watch, as he ascends to the front office of the Nashville Predators. He goes and gets 3 huge names in free agency.
Well, and a really interesting deal for Stamkos. They give him 4 years at $8 million when Tampa was offering 8 years at $3 million. So Tampa was trying to sign him effectively to a retirement contract but seemingly insulted him with the low AAV. And then Marchessault gets 5 by 5.5. And as much as you like the player, the Stanley Cup pedigree here, the backstory as well, Blake, I think that one has a chance to go down as one of the worst contracts signed today, just because it's a 5-year deal for a 33 going on 34-year-old guy, who, when the degradation starts there, you wonder what they're going to feel about that contract.
With Gensel signed, I honestly thought, go get Marchessault. Go get him if you're the Vancouver Canucks. Not at that price. No way.
Chicago also active today. Tyler,
you just mentioned Nashville. That's a 2-year window for Nashville, because in 3 years' time,
they got Saros re-signed now too for the long-term deal. They're peddling Askarov. I mean, lots happening with Barry Trotz's Nashville Predators.
Like in 3 years' time, Stamkos is 37, Marchessault's 36, Ryan O'Reilly's 36. Like, can you? Oh, wow.
Bertuzzi and Teravainen, 2 other wingers we had talked about signed in Chicago. Bertuzzi got 4 by 5.5. Teravainen got 3 by 5.4. For my money, one of the better contracts signed here today. You're only committing 3 years to a player who has offensive pedigree. Now, we talked about him not being perhaps the perfect fit with Elias because he's more creative than he is finisher. But
small too.
Well, small, but that's a guy who's under 30 years old though, who only so. I mean, he may get another very good contract. Anthony Mantha in Calgary, just the 1 year at $3.5 million, and Victor Arvidsson in Edmonton, 2 years, $4 million. If there's any further shade you want to put on the DeBrusk contract, these were some of the wingers that were in his neighborhood as the next guys up after the Gensel, Reinhart, Stamkos, Marchessault tiers. None of them got $7 million, Blake, and they all came in with a couple of exceptions.
7 years, you mean?
Or 7 years, sorry.
Yeah.
And they all came in south of DeBrusk's salary as well.
What you can do, though, is make the argument that none of them are as complete a player as Jake DeBrusk, who has great penalty kill and defensive metrics in addition to the ability to add 25 goals and 55 points. So they're all in that same vicinity, but all of them have a few flaws. Mantha's big, but doesn't play that big. Bertuzzi's inconsistent, and by all accounts, not a player that the Leafs even really showed any interest in bringing back whatsoever, which says something, I think, for you.
Yeah. Jason Zucker, we should also mention him, former Penguin that the Rutherford Alvin folks would know, not to mention someone we heard the Canucks connected to at the deadline. He signs a show me 1 year, $5 million deal in Buffalo. So I thought there was good value.
Which is good for him. He had 14 goals last year.
I thought there was good value in that secondary winger tier. And when a lot of those names went off the board, I thought to myself, oh boy, the Canucks do pony up turn on DeBrusk. There's part of me that wonders whether they would have been better off doing the Teravainen deal or the Mantha deal or the Arvidsson deal, one of those deals, as opposed to DeBrusk. Alas, they go with the son of Louis DeBrusk, of course, Hockey Night in Canada color man, Edmonton Oilers color man. Let's hear from Jake. He has already met the media, and he was asked about.
Let's wait a sec. I just got to load it up here.
Okay,
we'll get to
we should mention the puck pursuit on a guy like a DeBrusk is important too. So one stat, he's second in the league in puck retrieval on power play. Keeps plays alive,
and forechecking too in the Tocchet system, right? Like, talk about some of these other wingers. They may not necessarily bring the same by way of
and you add in Heinen, you add in Sherwood. The Canuck forecheck got better today. There's no question about it. Yellow Dog Chase My Tail Pale Ale, 473 ml 4-packs are on special for the month of July. Look for it on sale at private and government liquor stores.
Just more on DeBrusk. Yeah, does kill penalties, was used in a secondary role. Their third string penalty killer basically for Boston this past year. Does have some speed, played through a hand injury. Jay Fresh Hockey, a top 6 scoring winger with a well-rounded offensive game and good defensive metrics, who plays in all situations, lots of goal-scoring upside, even if he's not the most consistent. DeBrusk talked about one of the things that made him choose the Canucks was the opportunity to play either beside Elias Patterson or JT Miller. This is a 3-time 25-plus goal scorer, twice reached 27 in a season, twice reached the 27-goal mark. So basically, you're looking at a goal every 3 games from Jake DeBrusk.
Yeah. But those percentiles are really nice on that Jay Fresh card that we just had up. I mean, he hits above his weight class. You look at all the responses from the analytics guys to the signing. It's pretty unanimous. It's a tidy deal. It's a nice player for the Vancouver Canucks to add.
All right.
People wanted elite. So the problem is there was really, and I guess you could count Marchessault and Stamkos in the elite category, but their age was a mitigating factor.
Well,
a player in his prime, elite. There was one guy. It was Jake Gensel. So you were left scrambling for the next tier down, and this is not a bad option for the Vancouver Canucks.
We ready to hear from Jake?
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear from Jake DeBrusk on why he chose the Vancouver Canucks.
Crazy process, obviously, a free agency and going through for the first time, but in saying that, I think in terms of obviously being in Vancouver, they were very aggressive. I knew I had a really good feeling about them, and we were talking and things of that nature, and things were looking like they were going to hopefully go in the right direction. And I think it's funny, I woke up pretty early today and felt like a pretty normal day, and then as soon as I kind of got the confirmation that obviously it was coming here, I've been overwhelmed throughout the whole day. It's been really exciting, and it's something I just can't wait to get to the city, and I can't wait to get started. I feel very very lucky and honored to become a Vancouver Canuck.
The overwhelming is just getting started, Jake. If you thought Boston was a hockey market, you ain't seen nothing yet here with Vancouver.
I think he's going in eyes wide open.
I think so, because obviously his father very much understands this market. There's a ton of games here played. He's play against the Canucks. I mean, he's a kid who grew up province over, right? So he gets it. The other thing. Here is just when you think the Canucks Bruins rivalry may have tamped down 13 years later, right? You've got some guys. We know how Nikita Zadorov played against the Calgary Flames this past year, Blake. Now, it's only going to be a couple of games against the Canucks, but you know damn well that Zadorov is going to want to make himself known in these Bruins Canucks games that are coming up. I would suspect Lindholm as well. And so you have countermeasures on the other side in DeBrusk, Heinen, and Forbort, who are going to want to do the same and show Don Sweeney that he made a mistake in letting them get to free agency.
Zadorov will want to make himself known. He just will not make himself known as Big Z. He's just met the media in Boston and let them know there's another Big Z here. That's Big Z.
Good politics.
Do not call me Big Z.
Well done, Nikita, especially with Chara likely headed to the Hockey Hall of Fame next year. Have we told them about Yellow?
We have.
Oh, okay. Marvelous. Looking forward to chase my tail when I get home today.
Yeah, we've earned it.
It's
been a whirlwind deal. Before we get back to the Canucks in particular, the running total right now, we have reached, folks, the magical 100 signings mark today in the National Hockey League. $900,000 has been signed.
So
900,000 million.
It's 900 million. Absolutely.
900,000 million.
Jump change.
900 million.
900,000 is the money that's fallen in between couch cushions
today.
Look, there is a school of thought that the Vancouver Canucks have failed today. And so we'll go through a couple of tweets here and some of the criticism we're hearing of the Canucks. JB, they don't need a middle six forward. They need a first. They need a first liner. With regards to this being a responsible day for the Canucks, control selfishness on Twitter, good spin, Mad, judging them against one of the worst management groups in the last 3 years. Judge them against their stated objective. Hashtag raise the bar. They wanted to get better. No chance the defense is better. Myers is not a top four on a true cup contender. And they did not wind up adding the difference maker, skilled player in the top six. These are fair criticisms. I'm not sure the defense is better.
No.
In fact, it's on paper, it's worse.
It's also the first day of free agency.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the Canucks added bodies the rest of the summer. Not to mention, if you have depth like this, sometime in the middle of the season, you can peel off a guy and, send him to a a team that is floundering already and wants to just offload a difference-making player. Like the Canucks have now got a bunch of little or medium pieces that can be attractive to other teams in the middle of the season. So the forward lines are better. They are better. They're not spectacular, but they are better, I think. Defense needs some work, and we'll see what they can do in terms of the defense the rest of the way.
Well, look, they fixed two things in season last year with Lindholm and Zadorov. And I had mentioned to you at the outset, Blake, gosh, about a month ago now, that I was not convinced that they were going to be able to take the next step up in contending status this summer based on the available cap space and the number of homegrown unrestricted free agents. I always felt that this year was more about positioning the club for a return to the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's first and foremost. Make sure you had a roster that could hold up over 82 games and get you back to the dance. But then also positioning yourself for, well, this trade deadline, if everything is going well, but certainly next summer and next season when Thatcher Demko is going into the final year of his deal, when you're looking at a summer where you're able to extend Quinn Hughes, who would be going into the final year of his deal, and where you buy yourself a little bit more time for Tom Wielander and Jonathan Lekkerimäki to affect the hockey club. Like, they may have to wait for Lekkerimäki before they get that skilled finisher difference maker into the top six, or at the very least, they have bought themselves, I would think, with what they've done today, more time to be able to go out and seek that player via trade or in free agency next year, not to mention to integrate Tom Wielander the year later in a more prominent role. Because, yes, Myers as a top four right side defenseman is probably on borrowed time here. Well, it's definitely on borrowed time. Maybe you squeeze one more year out of that. And if you take a look at the top 9 forward group, it's good. Let's say DeBrusk is going to play with Patterson and Höglander, right?
Sure.
I guess that means we're putting Pius Suter for the moment back with JT Miller and Brock Besser to play Bluger as your third line center with Dakota Joshua and Connor Garland.
I'm not convinced of that.
Okay.
I think you can put Suter as the third line center.
All right, so that knocks Bluger down to your fourth line center. I guess that moves Danton Heinen up to your top line, playing with Miller and Besser.
Well, that's the thing. You've got some pieces you can move around. The other option is you see what the AHL guys bring to the table here, and I'm talking about the guys with offensive promise. Like, does Ratu or Podkolzin come to camp saying, I'm a National Hockey League player now?
Yeah, but
and the benefit of the roster as it's constructed right now is all the others. The bottom, like, you can roll the really good bottom 6 right now for the Vancouver Canucks, meaning you can open up a skilled spot for one of these young skilled guys. If they earn it. They earn it in camp and they earn it in the preseason, and you can give them that spot knowing either mid-game or the next game, if you need to go put the veteran back up there, you've got that option. But there's depth now where you don't have to put the young guy in a bottom 6 role because that's the only hole. You've got some pieces that can move around and some contingencies. And you kind of need Ratu. You kind of need Ratu or Podkolzin to share get off the pot.
They're hope bets, though.
Well, I know, but they're in the last year of the hope bets.
Yeah,
for probably both of them. So we're going to see desperation, I would think, on behalf. Ratu's younger than you think, but certainly for Podkolzin, this is it. We've been saying this for the last couple of years. This is it for Podkolzin with this organization.
Let's move on to Kiefer Sherwood here. And the Canucks signed 2 really good value contracts here. We have been citing AFP Analytics, the firm that looks into all of the different variables at play and then spits out predicted compensations for NHL free agents. They predicted that Kiefer Sherwood would be on a 2-year deal at just shy of $2.1 million. He gets that 2-year deal, but it's at $1.5 million. Canucks may very well have saved $600,000 per year here over the course of this Sherwood deal. Jay Fresh Hockey, a bottom 6 forechecking winger who hits everything that moves, 15th in the NHL and hits this past season with 234, 12th amongst forwards, can skate a little as well. We mentioned this player last week because, boy, he was a thorn in the side in that playoff series against the Predators. I thought he accounted himself quite well. In fact, there were a number of those sort of mid-level Nashville players who I thought would be nifty, sneaky little lads here if you could do so. They wound up re-signing Carrier, the defense, or did they? There was some talk.
As we talk right now,
there were reports that Alexander Carrier was going back to Nashville, and then those seemingly were pulled off the board. And it's funny because Patrick Alvin cited Sherwood's playoffs as one of the reasons why they were interested in adding the player. Blake, I have a feeling that guys who perform well against the Canucks in the postseason are going to be guys that Alvin read circles a little bit. He absolutely brought Anthony Beauvillier here to town in the Bo Horvat deal.
Who just signed as well, by the way.
Because of the work he had done as a New York Islander against the Penguins in the playoffs. So maybe, put that in the back of the memory bank for next summer as well. Who are the guys who become testy to play against, who play testy against the Vancouver Canucks in the postseason? They may very well be Canucks going forward.
I actually don't mind Beauvillier's contract, 1.25 for one deal with Pittsburgh. That seems like a very reasonable deal. Sherwood is a guy who's going to be likely very useful on the fourth line. And here's the thing, with that price point, and this is a worst case scenario, not going to be down on the kid. He just signed, ink is not yet dry, but most of that's variable. Like if it's a profound failure here with Kiefer Sherwood, $200K on your cap, and he's down in the American League. So
Langley's Danton Heinen is a player that we have talked about many, many times over the years, Blake, since the former BCHLer made quite a splash as a rookie with the Boston Bruins all those years ago. He was back in Boston for a second time. J-Fresh Hockey, a middle six utility winger who produces at a good rate, has strong puck skills, can play anywhere in the lineup, kills penalties. Nice to see him finally get more than 1 year. Here's another good value contract for the Canucks based on the AFP analytics projections. They had Heinen on a 3-year deal at just shy of $3 million. The Canucks get him on a 2-year deal at $2.25. So some terrific cap savings potentially here from the Canucks, and utility and value.
Look at that PK number
in
again.
The contract. Exactly. We knew that penalty killing was a thing, that they had started to re-sign some of the guys who had been penalty killers for them last year, in Dakota Joshua, Teddy Bluger, and Tyler Myers, but we knew they needed more, and Heinen fits that bill as well. And then there's big Derek Forbort. And look, this is another story about the Vancouver Canucks free agency. Nobody is sub 6 foot, and everybody's 190 or heavier. This coming off a draft where, did you see some of the size of some of the kids who were drafted this?
Yeah.
It was Sportsnet started calling it the big rig or the big truck draft. Virtually everybody who walked onto that podium was absolutely massive. So
look at the PK number here, folks. 99 percentile for Derek Forbort. By all accounts, he is dark matter on the penalty kill. All mass gets sucked into him and disappears. Matt, I think we officially now can put to rest your PK anxiety.
Yeah, he's a primary penalty killer with the Bruins. He played more than 3 minutes a night on the PK for a defenseman, playing 1748. Played just 30-some games. There was a lower body injury.
Message with Joe Haggerty on this, and he said the only time he wasn't in was when he was banged up. He said the PK missed him unbelievably when he wasn't there.
Physical third pair guy, says Jay Fresh, a bit turnover prone, but also a great penalty killer and strong chance suppressor. Boston gave up basically no odd man or cross slot chances with him on the ice, and that's something that Kevin Woodley always talks about. Make it easier on your goaltender. Don't have those cross slot chances. Speaking of goaltenders, Jiri Patera winds up being the veteran goaltender that the Vancouver Canucks sign. He's a 25-year-old from the Czech Republic, has played in each of the last 2 seasons for the Vegas Golden Knights out of the city. So 8 total NHL games. He's won 3 of them. He's an organizational number 3.
Yeah.
And I checked in with Kevin Woodley on this guy of In Goal Media, of course, the goaltending guru. And Kevin said, look, he's a 3 who can play up with some small tweaks to his game, but won't nuke Nikita Tolopilo by demanding starts in the AHL. So a good insurance policy here. They were never going to be able to get back with Casey DeSmith, who gets a $3 million deal and a $1.2 million raise. Blake, we were talking about him at about half that salary last week when it became apparent the Canucks were also in the market for a veteran goaltender.
And he's
All
only
right.
25 too, Patera. So there is probably still a trick or two that he can learn. There still might be some development left for Patera as well.
Before we bring Jeff Paterson in, our Canucks reporter, of course, a rink-wide Vancouver is down at Rogers Arena. Let's hear from Jake DeBrusk because, hey, you're the prime free agent. Your dad works as a broadcaster, and we brought two of your other Boston teammates over, so he was rightfully asked. Tell us about the other guys the Canucks
Scouting
are
reports.
getting here. Here's DeBrusk with the scouting reports on Heinen and Forbort.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with the hometown guy in Heino. Obviously, we came up together, from the start in Boston, and really good two-way player. I think he's a player that has great poise out there. He makes plays, isn't afraid to make them. I think he's really sound defensively. Obviously, I think his analytics and everything like that can support that. He's a guy that's got a great shot, and he's a good pro. I think that's something that I've always noticed with Heino is, how he takes the game and how it's evolved over the years. There was a couple of years we weren't together, but really excited to be with him again. It was nice to have him back this year and so forth. And with Derek, obviously, he's a bigger player, bigger D man that is a good penalty killer. Like, he loves eating pucks. He's a funny dude. He's a little bit of a guy that you got to warm up to in some ways, but he's a funny guy and really good for in and around the room. And they probably would just consider him a defenseman that plays through a lot. So I have a lot of respect for both those guys and really excited they're joining us.
There we go.
And just this from Canucks Insider, who is Chris Faber. Danton Heinen last year, lowest shorthanded goals against per minute on the Bruins in 94 minutes of ice time. He's only on the ice for 4 goals against.
I saw that, and so my next question was, why was he so far down the queue in terms of Boston penalty killing forwards? Coyle, Marchand, Beecher, Zaka, DeBrusk all played more, and in some cases significantly more than Heinen on the penalty kill. He was their 6th most used PK forward in Boston last year. All right. And the other thing, our buddy Phil at Part Phil is asking, Jake DeBrusk looks like a young Blake Price, huh? There is some similarities. Bring up the photo of Jake DeBrusk and think about Blake Price 25 years ago. I think there's a little bit of absolutely. Okay, let's get to Jeff Paterson. He's down at Rogers Arena, and today a presentation of the Arnold Palmer designed Whistler Golf Club, off to an incredible start here in the 2024 season. Amazing reviews on the course condition and service. We're reminding group organizers of 12 or more here. It is not too early to start booking those September and October buddy or corporate trips. The prime times are filling up faster at the Whistler Golf Club. And of course, you bring a group of 12 or more, you, the organizer, plays for free. Tell us about your group at whistlergolf.com/groups. Patrick Alvin, Canucks general manager, will be speaking here in about 25 minutes or so. So we're going to talk to J-Pat and get him out to make sure he can get down there and question the Canucks general manager after a very busy day. We got Jeff ready, Grady?
We do.
Okay, let's bring him in. Our Canucks reporter, of course, the host of Rink Wide Vancouver. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, welcome to the land of still burgundy seats here at Rogers Arena.
Oh,
A little surprised at that as I walked in. It is July 1st. They'll be playing games here in September, preseason games at the very least. No ice down, but this is a day that's all about stick handling. And for the Vancouver Canucks, I think for the most part, they have addressed some areas of need without locking themselves into unmanageable contracts. Some may wonder about going full term with Jake DeBrusk, but as Blake's talked about, one of the younger members of this free agent crop and a guy that's a 3-time 25-plus goal scorer. They needed goal scorers, and guess what? Goal scorers in the National Hockey League get paid. So I can live with 5.5 if he can return somewhere between 25 and 30 goals more often than not over the balance of this contract.
Was that your favorite contract of the ones they've signed today, Jeff? I mean, he's by far the best player of the group that they've brought in, but contract-wise, which one did you prefer?
I will say that I like the addition of Kiefer Sherwood, and I'm not expecting massive counting stats from this guy, but he was the 15th player in the National Hockey League in terms of hits last season, and he didn't play all 82 games. So they now have Dakota Joshua, who was top 10, and they add Kiefer Sherwood. And I have to say, guys, having been there in Nashville and watching the games here against the Predators in that opening round, my eye was drawn to just how hard he played. He was an absolute thorn in the side of the Vancouver Canucks, to the point that the Preds were prepared to put their fourth line out against top lines for the Vancouver Canucks and let those guys go at it and try and take a strip off some of the Canucks top players. Kiefer Sherwood did not miss an opportunity to finish a check. Ask Quinn Hughes about that. So this is a guy, the motor is always running. And when you think that Sam Lafferty somehow got 2 years by $2 million in Buffalo, this is a replacement who I think is I'm going to say more effective, certainly more physical than Lafferty ever was as a member of the Vancouver Canucks. And I like that signing. So, he's a role player and he knows his role, but I think under Rick Tocchet, Tocchet's going to have a ton of time for a player like Kiefer Sherwood.
Back to DeBrusk, he's never averaged over 17 minutes of ice time with the Bruins, and yet he plays on the PK, got a couple of shorthanded goals last year. In fact, plays on a power play, had 10 power play points last year for the Boston Bruins. There's room to get these counting stat totals higher if he's playing 18 minutes a game here for the Canucks, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And he talked about how excited he was to get that opportunity. That was one of the things that sold him on Vancouver. But I thought, really some self-awareness as well when he was asked about areas that can improve. And he basically said everywhere he wants to get better. He still thinks that he's got more to offer in a lot of areas of the game. But if he is getting the opportunity to play higher in the lineup, and certainly it looks like he would be penciled in alongside Elias Patterson, and I've said this to you guys, I've said this elsewhere, no matter what the Canucks do here on July 1st, the most important thing for them this offseason is to get star-level Elias Patterson back into the mix. So that's sort of out of their control here on July 1st. But if they get anything close to the player that they've had for most of his time in the National Hockey League, then it does become a really enticing opportunity for a player like Jake DeBrusk to play with a playmaker, a guy that has the vision that Elias Patterson does. And, ultimately it's up to the coaching staff, and that's what the rest of the offseason and training camp is for, to come up with lines. But it would seem like DeBrusk, Höglander, and Patterson could very well be a line for the Vancouver Canucks. And so for Jake DeBrusk, that sounds like opportunity is knocking, and, let's see what he does with it. But again, he's being put in a position to succeed, and he's already had some success throughout his career, as you would expect. I mean, he was a mid-teen first-round pick, so there were high expectations on him coming out of junior hockey. I think at times he's lived up to that, but again, I think he's got more to give, and the Canucks are certainly banking on that as well.
So, Jeff, let's take on the criticism, because there are some now in Canucks circles that are basically saying they failed to get an elite winger, that for all the talk of raising the bar, that meant going out, putting your money where your mouth is, and taking the big swings at the biggest names available. They were kind of 1.5 feet in at the deadline. They made the moves for Zadorov and Lindholm, and then demurred when the price on Gensel got too high. You'll remember Alvin coming out and saying, hey, we've already traded some prospects here. We didn't want to totally bankrupt the kitty going forward. I'm looking at a tweet here. Talk at Staples. Step back for sure. Myers playing second pair is bad. We'll struggle to score. Demko better stay healthy. Many people said to me on Twitter over the weekend, hey, Canucks could have traded for Gensel's rights, right? Canucks could have traded for Tanev's rights if you absolutely wanted Chris Tanev. Take that on, that they aren't quite fully committed to being all in here and failed to add the elite talent that would get them to the next level and raise this bar.
Yeah, as I sit here 3 hours into free agency and talk to you guys, they're not a better team than they were when the season ended in Game 7 against the Edmonton Oilers. Nikita Zadorov had a huge playoffs. Elias Lindholm was a real contributor in the playoffs. Jake DeBrusk comes in. He adds a necessary element. They needed more goals. We saw that. They scored 3 goals in the final 2 games of the season against that series against the Edmonton Oilers. They need goal-scoring help. I would have liked to have seen them add another goal scorer here in free agency. And you can say, hey, they're not done, but they are running out of cap space. And I get that they, signed a player like Pius Suter early in August. And we'll see. There will still be some players that shake loose. There are other ways to address that. But in the here and now, I don't think that they're as good today as they were at the end of the season, they don't play games in July and August. So this is a management group that I think recognizes that. I look at their depth chart, and I just talked about the potential of a Patterson, Höglander, DeBrusk line. Then if Miller and Besser stay together, I'm not a huge proponent of Pius Suter playing in the top 6, but if it's not him, Danton Heinen wasn't brought in here to be a top 6 winger for the Vancouver Canucks. So I'm kind of curious ultimately where he is going to slot in, because I just think with Lindholm gone, you look at Suter probably as the third line center. I've seen some people say, hey, run it back with Bluger between Garland and Joshua. I just think Pius Suter is a better offensive player. I think he thinks the game offensively better than Teddy Bluger does. I think he's got better offensive chops. I would be far more inclined to give Pius Suter an opportunity there and see if he can't rev up both Dakota Joshua and Connor Garland, because you remember the slow starts that like a lot of guys had heated starts last year to the season. Joshua and Garland weren't two of them. And so you'd like to, give them an opportunity to succeed, play them with a center that has some offensive bent. And I think that of the two, I get Bluger had a nice run with those guys, but I just think over the long haul, Pius Suter is probably a better option there. But there are still some holes. And, we haven't even talked about the defense. Look, Forbort's I think a decent replacement for a guy like Ian Cole, but there's no replacement for Nikita Zadorov. And so if you're trying to go a little bit cheaper on the back end and you go Forbort, and if it's Noah Juleson time, look, beyond Quinn Hughes and Philip Hronik, there is absolutely no puck moving among the remaining 4 defensemen. And that is a bit of an issue and a concern for me. That's why I think when I look at the limited cap resources that they have, as much as I'd like them to add another scorer, I think it's imperative that they find one more NHL ready, one more defenseman that has NHL games on his resume. We're not talking about a prospect. We're not talking about a hope bet here. I think before the season starts, they're looking to add one more bona fide National Hockey League defense.
By the way, I'm 100% with you, Jeff. Frankly, you could argue that a secondary puck mover was something that was lacking off last year's team too. It was Quinn Hughes and the trees, right, that they surrounded him with. I did wonder whether they'd be involved on guys like Gustafsson, Brandstrom, like that level of puck moving third pair guy today. Thus far, they haven't. I do wonder whether they were a little bit sticker shocked by the price of some of these defensemen and what they got, because there were some contracts on defense today that Blake Grady and I looked at each other and went, what are you? I mean,
Joel
Edmondson getting 4 years.
Smaller puck moving defensemen, though, can probably be acquired on the trade market, because I think their usability is being questioned now as we see the league get that much bigger. And in terms of looking at last year's group and this year's group, Jeff, too, Jake DeBrusk and Elias Lindholm had the same season offensively in a different position. Granted, one a center, one a wing. But in terms of the ability of the Vancouver Canucks just to replace offense, DeBrusk and Lindholm had the exact same seasons almost, both offensively in the regular season and in the playoffs. 10 points for Lindholm, 11 points for DeBrusk in 13 games each in the playoffs. So they didn't lose anything there. Counting stats wise, they're just going to have to figure out what to do with that third line center role, as you talked about with Pius Suter. But, and I think there's every bit the expectation that playing with Elias Paterson, DeBrusk can actually get those points higher going forward. But the playoff prowess is important to note as well, because this team has every expectation to get into the playoffs next year, Jeff. And I think what we also saw was this management group signing guys with the playoffs in mind, which hasn't necessarily been something that previous management groups have had to deal with.
No, you're right. Really, over the last decade, this has been just about trying to, advance the cause of the hockey club, fill some gaps, championship pedigree. We know how much they overpaid for that with a player like Jay Beagle. You're right. The bar's been raised here. We know that Patrick Alvin, despite getting to the second round and taking the Oilers to 7 games, led his season-ending press conference with not being happy, wasn't pleased with the state of affairs. He wants more. And so I don't think that can be undervalued. DeBrusk played 86 playoff games, if I'm not mistaken, knocking on the door of 100 postseason games. That's a fair bit of experience that a lot of these guys here certainly don't have. And, it is kind of a funny day in as much as it's free agent day. And it does look like basically a massive trade between Vancouver and Boston. And the Bruins feel that they've addressed some of their needs, and it comes at the cost of players that are now here with the Vancouver Canucks. So, that was one of the things when I first looked at Jake DeBrusk. It was, where is he topped out in terms of his individual production per season, but also, this is a guy that's delivered in the playoffs, has had some success, has played on the big stage, and has been able to find his game and have that translate to the playoffs. So, in losing Lindholm, obviously a right shot center, penalty kill, face-offs, late game, DeBrusk can give you some of those things, but he's not Elias Lindholm, different player, different, just the way that he affects a hockey club is going to be different. But in saying that, I mean, Jake DeBrusk can do some things that Elias Lindholm, didn't do for the Vancouver Canucks, certainly in the regular season, and that is bring some degree of consistent scoring. And so, I think when you commit to a guy long term, like the Canucks have done here with DeBrusk, certainly you want to see some consistency. They believe in that, or I don't think they would have been willing to go the term that they did here. And as we said earlier, he's going to get an opportunity. And I think at 5.5, like, goal scorers get paid on July 1st. Everybody probably gets a little more than they ought to have, but if you score goals in the National Hockey League, you're going to get yours. And so I think to get a guy that's been to 25 goals 3 times at $5.5 million, like, it may sound outlandish to some, but the reality of the fact is that's kind of the going rate for 25 to 30 goal scorers.
Yeah. Jeff, Nikita Zadorov got 6 years at $5 million per for Boston. Would you have done that deal?
I think in the lead up to free agency, I thought if the Canucks could get to $5 million, that was going to be enough to satisfy Zadorov. And so when Alvin told us on Friday that he was going to hit the market, I was prepared today to be absolutely blown away by some ridiculous number. I don't know how many years the Canucks were willing to go, but I have to think that they knew the stakes here, that if they wanted to keep this player, it was going to have to be sizable money and for a lot of years. So, we may never know ultimately, but I can't imagine that the Canucks offer was all that far off what the Boston Bruins were able to sign him for. Again, it would have come with inherent risks of, 29 to 34 or 35, but I do think that Nikita Zadorov would have been able to deliver, pretty decent seasons over the duration of that contract. So as much fun as he was to watch, and he was fun to watch and to deal with and all those types of things, would love to have seen the Canucks keep him around. Obviously, the two sides couldn't come to terms. I am a little surprised, though, when I finally saw the numbers in Boston, that I just have to think that the Canucks weren't that far off. So I'm not totally sure where the breakdown was between the two sides. But water under the bridge now. He has signed a long-term deal, and they'll love him in Boston. You think of that market, sure. They will absolutely love Nikita Zadorov.
Yeah, and a 6-year deal means he'll play out his age 34 season in Boston.
Yeah. I mean,
he'll need a new nickname there, though.
What's that?
He'll need a new nickname there, right? You can't.
Yeah,
right,
he's already
He's
established.
already
said,
good politics there
from
future Senator Nikita Zadorov.
Quick comment on the goaltending position with Casey DeSmith getting the contract that he did, and the Canucks were right to walk away from that and say no, thank you. Patera is just going to be an AHL goalie for the most part, break glass in case of emergency. At least we think. I mean, there's nothing more coming. This is Artur Shilov's job now as the backup. You'd have to think.
I think so. I mean, I think he put his best foot forward in the playoffs, thrown into a tough spot, and certainly thrived there. And I kind of feel like he has left the American Hockey League behind. I do think the comments of Patrick Alvin last week, and I think we may have discussed this, I wonder how much of those were, just negotiation tactics, that if he didn't want to agree, and he's an RFA, so he doesn't have leverage unless some other team swooped in here. But if they made him an offer and it was rebuffed in any way, to get his attention, maybe you just say publicly, hey, maybe we'll just shop for a veteran guy. If you don't want to, sign at our terms here, we do have some other options. So they went out, they get a little bit of goaltending depth, the guy that's touched the National Hockey League and in a pinch. But no, I think it's Artur Silov's time, because, guys, they've got 2 years left on Thatcher Demko. And they need to see Thatcher Demko come back, report completely healthy, and then stay healthy. And I think a 50-32 game kind of split. I don't want to see more than Thatcher Demko. I don't need to see Thatcher Demko every night in November or February. When I need to see Thatcher Demko is every night that the Vancouver Canucks step on the ice in the playoffs. And that's something that he wasn't able to do for them this past season. So I do think that capping his games would make a ton of sense. I think Silovs is the guy. And in doing so, if you can get Artur Silovs 32 starts, you might get a better sense of whether you've got a legitimate number one in waiting at the National Hockey League level, because ultimately at this time next year, they can have a decision to make on Thatcher Demko. Do you extend him? Do you use him in the final? Goaltenders don't get traded to the trade deadline. Like, we just don't see that. Like, if there was going to be some sort of goaltending move, I think you're looking at sometime next summer with Thatcher Demko, if they decide that he's a chip to play and they've got a guy that they believe in Artur Silovs. I'm not trying to run Thatcher Demko out of town, but these are the decisions that they're going to have to make a year from now.
First things first, get Artur Silovs' name on a contract extension. He's an RFA. Just watching the TSN free agent frenzy this morning, they went through a goaltending exercise where Jamie McLennan said, hey, the Leafs should offer sheet Artur Silovs. So we'll be looking. That
is the question across now is there an RFA trade the Canucks can make? With the remaining cap space they have, do they have assets? And I don't mean with Silovs involved there necessarily, but is there an RFA trade to be made here for the Vancouver Canucks, of the Netchas variety? That's not necessarily him either, but is that the one other way the Canucks can improve, either on the blue line or down the middle?
I'm just not convinced that they've got the trade chips. I know that they've got a first rounder next year. I just, you look at their development camp roster and there just isn't much flash there because they have peddled so many picks here over the last bunch of years. And if you're in win now mode, maybe tomorrow isn't a consideration, but I don't know. To get Marty Necas out of Carolina, I think the price would be significant. And I'm just not convinced that the Vancouver Canucks have the trade capital necessary to make that kind of deal.
100% with you, Jeff. About $2 to $3 million in cap space remaining, and if you're shopping in that aisle, that's the Lekkerimäki, Tom Willander, or future first.
In a win now mode, does Lekkerimäki for Netchas not make some?
I think you
sense?
Go into next season, you see where your hockey club is. Yep. If it is showing you the signs that it showed you this past season, then I think you have to think longer and harder about decisions like that. Yes. But in the here and now, I suspect you'll see perhaps some tinkering here throughout the rest of the summer, and then you go full bore into October with this lineup. Jeff, you got a general manager to go cover, so we'll be listening and for Patrick Alvin's comments here today. Thank you for this. Catch up later in the week.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter, of course, the host of Rink Wide Vancouver from Rogers Arena, where Patrick Alvin will be meeting the media here shortly. Okay. So I want to get into this now. Chris Tanev signs a 6-year deal with his hometown Toronto Maple Leafs, who went off and traded for his rights this past weekend from the Dallas Stars. It was an interesting dilemma for Chris Tanev. Did he want to stay home? Home being defined as the team that he finished last season for, the Dallas Stars. Did he want to go home to where he grew up in the Toronto Maple Leafs, or did he want to come home to his NHL organization, the team that signed him as a very lightly regarded college free agent out of RPI? He could hula hoop in a Cheerio. The shot was more beer league than it was National League. And yet there he was playing important playoff games for the Vancouver Canucks as a skinny, scrawny little kid without a lot of pro hockey experience, and has turned into a magnificent player, one of the best defensive defensemen of his era. He is also 34 years old, and he was just signed to a 6-year contract in which he will turn 40 in the final year of it in December, a Christmas baby, December 20th for Tanev. Here's Frank Saravelli from the weekend. If, quote, fake years are added to a player's contract in his mid-30s as a method to suppress the average annual value or to entice a signature with additional total dollars, the NHL will monitor and pursue later if proven as a means of cap circumvention. Example, if the Leafs want to offer Tanev 6 years at $4 million, Blake, lo and behold, look what the Leafs have did.
Yeah.
They signed Chris Tanev at 6 years at $4.5 million. Well, that won't be looked upon fondly later, Frank writes. We've been through this once before, hence the 35-plus contract rules. Out of the 924 players who played in the NHL this past season, how many 40-year-olds? One, Mark Giordano. And he's a bit of a different case. He won a Norris at 35. Bottom line here, as Frank notes, it is expressly prohibited in the CBA for a free agent to agree to a post-contract arrangement for services as a team ambassador or player development, effectively what Roberto Luongo is for the Florida Panthers, who you might remember retired, leaving the Canucks susceptible to cap recapture penalties. Tampa was considering doing this with Stamkos on the 8-year deal, right? It would have been very difficult to say, no, we believe in a 41, 42-year-old Steven Stamkos as goal scorer. They weren't able to get it done because Stamkos wasn't going to play ball. Tanev has played ball with the Leafs here, Blake. This is something that needs to be penalized if Chris Tanev isn't a healthy hockey player playing games for the Leafs at age 39, age 40.
Well, I just don't know how you legislate this because this is not a crazy term of contract. Of course, there's an 8-year cap anyway. They didn't sign him to 8 years.
It's a 6-year deal for a guy who is going to be 35 years old.
Hey, I'm not saying
December.
I'm not
Come
saying
on.
they're not doing what
Come
you.
on.
I'm not saying they're not doing what you're talking about. But how on earth do you legislate it? It's a 6-year deal. There's 2 contracts that can be longer than this deal, and of all the kinds of players. Now, not this particular player because of his injuries, but of all the kinds of players
There's just no
that do play into their late 30s and 40s, defensive defensemen are one of them. And this guy, if the league called the Toronto Maple Leafs, you know what they'd say? They'd say, go look around. Find out how many teams wanted to pay Chris Tanev this kind of money. This player's not getting any worse. This player's going to be able to play into his late 30s.
Utter nonsense.
Why?
How many other 6-year deals do you think Chris Tanev was offered?
Matt,
Come
again, listen to
Come on.
the words coming out
And
of
of
my
course,
mouth.
he did not get to the free agent market, Blake. Like they traded for his rights to be able to give him, which makes it even fishier, in my view.
Well, no, because it fishier would be if he signed him to an 8-year deal, because that's the way that would be the purpose of trading for him.
Well, they didn't have the shame to sign an 8-year deal because everybody would have known the jig is up at 8 years.
But Matt,
Like,
my whole
if this
point is
is-
they are probably doing what you're doing, what you're talking about. Yes, everybody sees that, but there is no leg to stand on judiciously here by the league to say you can't do this.
There wasn't a leg to stand on judiciously on the cap recapture penalties. Those were perfectly legal contracts by the letter of the CBA when Vancouver and other franchises signed them. Vancouver's the only one that got fucked because Roberto decided to retire to a cushy front office job with Florida. Again, expressly prohibited by the CBA. And this deal with Tanev, by no means do the Toronto Maple Leafs expect he is going to play into his age 40 season, Blake. I'm sorry. I just don't believe it. I don't think anybody else believes it. It doesn't pass the smell test. And if you can go back and retroactively and vindictively punish those backdiving contracts that Roberto and others signed, and really only the Vancouver Canucks were punished on it, then I sure hope the National Hockey League years from now comes down and lays the hammer on the Toronto Maple Leafs after this 10.
Luongo signed a 12-year deal. That set off alarm
as
bells.
a late 20s guy and a goaltender, and goaltenders do play later into their career.
Still, that was a gobsmackingly eyes jumping out of the skull number, a 12-year
Well,
deal.
but Hossa and other guys signed those terms, Blake.
Right.
The Detroit guys signed those.
I'm not trying to say the Canucks didn't get screwed. They
well,
did.
Well,
but
the Canucks signed one of those after several had been signed previously. This is new frontier stuff from the Toronto Maple Leafs. 6 years for a 34, 35-year-old defenseman. the guy who leads the league in going up the tunnel for,
but the other
for medical treatment in game.
If he had signed a 4-year deal, would you be saying this?
No.
Right. So you're talking about a 2-year difference. If
Yeah,
Luongo
but those are big years.
If Luongo signs a 10-year deal, we're still having the same conversation about Luongo. The league says the same thing about Luongo, even on a 10-year deal.
Then his deal would have expired. He left 2 years on the table, Roberto, if I'm not mistaken.
No, but I'm saying
stand to be corrected.
It's still cap circumvention at 10 years. It is. But you're saying at 4 years, it's not.
If you want to say it's cap circumvention by the spirit, fair enough. Then punish all of those that circumvented the cap by the spirit. If you want to say, no, they're perfectly allowed by the letter of the CBA, then they're allowed in no further action. But it's one or the other. You can't apply a standard to one franchise, as they did with Vancouver and Roberto, and now turn around and not apply that same standard with the Leafs and Tanev.
My whole point is, Matt, there's no way of proving that they or the Chris Tanev have no intention of playing out the term of this contract. It's not unreasonable to assume that Chris Tanev is playing at 38. So why is it unreasonable to say that he's playing at 40?
Because those are two massive years, Blake. The gap between a 38 and a 40-year-old can be very, very large. That is typically, and we have a large body sample size here that tells you professional athletes, they don't get to 38 very often, but you know where they get even less frequently? 40.
And for
one player
for wingers and centers
40 years old
and skilled defensemen, all that is true.
Like
the
one player played at 40 this year.
Yeah.
One.
And would you be
and
surprised?
If you go down to 38, I'm gonna guess there were dozens. And so that's the difference.
And if you told me that Chris Tanev in 6 years is going to be that one guy, you can make the argument that he is. You can.
Anyways, that contract is smelly, and that is one that I sure hope that the National Hockey League, not only as Frank Seravalli says, monitors, but comes down on if in fact Chris goes away in 3 or 4 years to Robidoux Island or wherever he is going to basically collect his money as the Leafs get to circumvent the cap.
For what it's worth, Tanev's durability, he's never had a 3-year swath where he's played more games than the last 3 years.
We've talked about it. I did not think the Calgary contract would age well because I thought there were a lot of hard miles on that body, and he was getting brittle, as we saw here in Vancouver, and he wasn't going to be able to hold up. To his infinite credit, he is tougher than a rusty can of nails. He held up over Calgary, gave them fantastic work, did well by Dallas. I mean, look at the playoffs he had with Dallas in shutting down a couple of the top forwards in the National Hockey League. And yet, hey, you're not fooling anyone. Nobody is fooled by the term on that contract. Do you not think Central Registry and the NHL aren't fielding calls now from teams that were interested in Chris Tanev saying, what's going on with that Leafs contract? Of course they are.
But that is so less, that's much less provable than a player going on LTIR for 50 games and then all of a sudden being ready on game one. Like, they're not willing to address that. This is
I think they're going to be willing to address that in time here because the managers want that. That's been the latest move there, and lo and behold, seems like there's also movement on the length of the season schedule, right?
Yes, Pierre LeBrun suggesting that they will go to an 84-game season, which I know, not awesome, but before you gasp fully, they're talking about mandating a no more than 4-game preseason, so your overall games played is down, and starting the season opening day, first 3 days of October, meaning that you're handing out the Stanley Cup still at a net positive of probably July or June 10th, June 12th, as opposed to the 24th of June. So that's good news.
Yes. 84 games is going to give some guys shots at records too, right?
They played 84-game seasons before, but only a couple times.
3 years in the early 90s, 2 or 3 years in the early 90s.
Yeah.
There were actually 84-game seasons in the National Hockey League.
It's
anyways,
long, but
if you're a season ticket subscriber, at least you're getting one more game that counts
a meaningful
in your package as opposed to the preseason games. This has been something that's been going on in most of the sports, actually. Season ticket subscribers saying to their club, you're kidding me. I got to pay for this number of preseason games at full time. Nobody wants those games. And so there's been a pressure point there. I think there was also a pressure point, Blake, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, I think with John Shannon. The totality of the hockey world looked at this past season schedule and went, too much. June 24th. They looked at the Florida Panthers. You know, some guy still drunk from the parade and having to make career decisions today, right? Some front office
With
members
headaches.
not able to even attend the parade because they're busy in the bunker preparing for free agency. Like the Washington Capitals didn't even leave Vegas. They didn't want to spend the time of putting people on the plane flying cross country. They just set up a war room in Vegas and said, we'll conduct free agency from here, as opposed to going back to Washington. You could very well have free agent signings of the Capitals who beat the management team to the arena for an introductory press conference. So, yeah, everything was thrown out of kilter this past year, delaying the season as late as they delayed it. What we can tell you is the Vancouver Canucks will start next season against the Calgary Flames. The home opener announced for October 9th against the Calgary Flames. The Calgary Flames team today that will sign Anthony Mantha to what I thought was one of the better contracts of the day. They got him to agree to a 1-year deal at, what was it, 3.5. Also re-signed Igor Sharangovich. I know he had been a priority for them as well, but you take a look at, where the Flames, what the Flames have done since the offseason. And, they traded Jacob Markstrom. They traded Andrew Mangiapane. So very much a team in retool or rebuild there in Calgary.
Sarah Valley has an interesting point here on a team that might be desperate to make a deal. Now, I looked, and from a Canucks perspective, I don't know that there's anybody that makes sense here, but he says, not sure there's a team in a worse cap situation than the Avs. 11 forwards, that's including Landeskog and Nikushkin, 5 defensemen and 2 goalies. Again, that's 11, 5, 2 with $300K in cap space.
Yeah, so they're going to have to make some trades. Adrian Data reported they were in on Stamkos. Stamkos chose Nashville over Colorado. Now, we don't know what Colorado was offering. I can't imagine they broke the bank here because of the cap situation.
They must have had a trade up their sleeves, maybe to relieve some of that cap stuff. I don't know.
Okay, Grady, let's do menu here, and we'll get to our Bet365 bets of the day, and then we've got more coming on the other side with regards to the Vancouver Canucks at the draft table and everything that we saw this past weekend in Las Vegas. So today's menu brought to you by Greta. A quick walk to the rink or stadium, a go-to spot for food, drink, fun before, after the game. They have the amazing arcade. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com. Bit of a different show today with free agency going down. No hashtags today. We will get back to hashtags tomorrow's program. We were joined by Jeff Paterson. Anticipate we'll hear a little bit from Patrick Alvin coming up here. See if we can get that turned around for you. If not, we'll talk hear from the general manager tomorrow. And we'll get, promise you, we'll get to our mailbag segment to the people we go later in the week after everyone's had time to digest everything that's happening here in free agency with the Vancouver Canucks. So, time for our Bet365 bets of the day. Was this close to pulling off the double upset at Euro? Remember, we had Switzerland and Slovakia, and Slovakia seconds away from beating the English. I'm going back to Euro in the round of 16 tomorrow. Austria's looked terrific. Turkey's looked pretty good too. So I'm going to go draw, expecting extra time there at plus 230. And frankly, I'm wondering about Romania and the Dutch going extra time as well at plus 350. France and Belgium weren't too far away from extra time today.
You done?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to the other soccer tournament. Early line on.
It's the Copa. Her name was
on
Lola.
Canada.
She was a show.
And Canada right now at plus 180.
That's it.
It's a pick 'em, Bridley. Venezuela's plus 170, which might be good value given how hot they're playing.
Mhm.
Like they went 3-0 in the round robin. 3-0.
Yeah. Venezuela?
Yeah.
They didn't tie Mexico? Did they beat Mexico?
Didn't they ultimately?
I thought they tied Mexico, but you get
Undefeated maybe was the word I saw.
Yeah.
Then, yes. But a pretty unbelievable run of play here for Venezuela. So if you want to do the Don Taylor bet plus 170 on Venezuela, you wanted to get some home cooking, Canada plus 180. I was right.
Yeah, it was Ecuador who tied Mexico. Venezuela won. Yeah.
3-0.
Yeah. They were absolute champions of their group. Okay. Open account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, use code VANBONUS when opening that account. We're going to have more on the Canucks draft as well as a hell of a night at BC Place on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova. Welcome back, everybody, as we take a look at the weekend that was.
Yeah. So the draft at the Sphere looked absolutely
Did look good.
Amazing. Like the opening, has the commissioner ever looked that good standing in front of that massive spherical screen?
It may have changed their mind, too.
Absolutely popped. Unlike any NHL draft or perhaps even event that I can remember. Now, the venue is amazing, and they, of course, made a big deal that they were the first sporting league or sporting event that got into the venue. But, boy, if you wanted to make the draft a yearly occurrence in that venue.
Well, Matt, they
yes, please.
We're doing all the reporting here of the fact that this was going to a satellite draft starting next year. But then the fact that at the end, Gary Bettman's final words are, we'll see you for the 2025 draft, venue to be announced, date to be announced. To me, everybody
mistake.
No. But Blake. I think what I read into that, Matt, was this has gone so well. We've got to negotiate to come back here.
Blake, so we talked about it when the NHL succumbed to the whining of their general managers. You know, some of those general managers who just don't want anybody talking, asking questions, looking in at their player personnel decisions and process. But you were distinct from the National Football League, the NBA, Major League Baseball, in that you had teams operating their draft from the floor and in close quarters. And some of the images, some of the optics that presents to your fan base that were different and frankly more engaging than what you get in the other drafts. You know, general manager from so-and-so gets up, takes a walk to the sideboards, joined by another general manager. What are they up to?
It just looks slick,
so you always had that going for you. And then you compound for me the engagement when you put it in a venue like the Sphere and you have that sort of interface display graphic ability that was going on.
Man, it just looked world class.
It looked unbelievably great.
It looked better than anything the NFL could build or NBA could build. And traditionally, it's just been a big TV screen in the back, like a square TV. To have this so immersive is better than anything that they've ever had. And to have it all on a billboard outside, because of course it's doing every pick on the exterior of the Sphere too. It's publicity that they couldn't possibly buy. So to me, what I saw was them pivoting, because if he could have closed out the draft by saying, we'll talk to you next year from 32 different locations as we expand our draft. He could have tried to spin it into something positive.
Yeah.
The fact that he left it TBA means they're going to go and talk to the Sphere about booking again.
Gary and Bill in a studio reading names going forward. No, please don't tell me you're going back there after you had a weekend like this one. Macklin Celebrini and the kids walking down to the stage too. Like even that looked better.
Yeah.
No, that was as good and slick an NHL production as I can remember. And I so hope you're right, Blake, that the commissioner and people in powerful places are going to have a second think on this, go back to those whiny, cranky general managers and go, guess what? Once a year, you're going to conduct your business in plain view of our fans, because that was an awesome event.
If you went back there every year, at least the GMs know it's
Right.
a direct flight for everybody. It's
right.
Good food. It's warm weather. Like there's not a lot to complain about.
Right.
For 3 days in Vegas.
No, for sure. It's a destination. People want to go there, right?
Yeah.
In some cases, some of the draftees are too young to drink or gamble.
But the parents are. The parents.
I know some parents who were there in Vegas this weekend. Anyways, second year in a row that a Vancouver kid, Macklin Celebrini, of course, is the first overall pick of the San Jose Sharks. And as mentioned earlier in the show, the theme of this draft was size. Oh my God. Were there some really big teenagers who found their way to the stage at the Sphere in Las Vegas? The reactions specifically from Beckett Seneca, the surprise third overall pick from Anaheim. And it's the other thing, the NHL continues to deliver some drama and some surprises right at the top of the draft, right? This is several years in a row now where we've been surprised by who has gone within the first few picks of the draft. You remember the Shane Wright, Yuri Slafkovsky. Anyways, Beckett Seneca, absolutely gobsmacked, dumbfounded that he's the third overall pick. The same with Tarek Parasek, the Prince George winger, who did not suspect that he would be going to the Washington Capitals and had a holy bleep moment there on the draft floor. So anyways, I thought it was incredible production. Let's get to the Canucks side of things here. Look, we knew that this was not going to be a banner day for the Vancouver Canucks. In fact, I suspect that is one of the more boring drafts that Jim Rutherford, Patrick Alvin, and company have ever had. Not a memorable one for the Canucks and their Todd Harvey and their amateur scouting department.
But by
number
all
one,
accounts,
you got to wait around to make your first pick in the third round, 93rd overall, and you only make the 5 picks.
But if you're going to do this kind of a draft, you do it the way that the Canucks did, and they took flyers, and they could go 0 for 5 on these draft picks. But if any one of them hits, they will probably do pretty well.
Right. And you wondered whether the Canucks would be involved in any kind of trades on the draft floor. We've talked about how they don't have a ton of trade capital, but I did wonder whether they were going to make any kind of like trade back, trade down and accumulate more picks. In fact, that's the other thing from this draft. You look at the number of teams that made so few picks. I think Dallas made just 3 picks. A bunch of teams that made just 4 picks. A bunch of teams that made just 5 or so picks. So 5 picks from the Canucks. They don't trade down and accumulate more picks or anything like that. Their first selection is a winger who had Melvin Fernstrom, who had a tremendous season in the Swedish junior ranks. Everyone says his skating's got to be better, but there's potential for an offensive scoring winger there. Right shot centermen are never a bad idea.
That's
Riley
right.
Patterson is that from the Barrie Colts of the OHL. People, the draft next seem to like Anthony Romani, the 6th round winger, because he had a monster season. Now, passed over in last year's draft, but came back and showed the world 111 points, 58 goals in 68 games for the North Bay Battalion, and he's a right shooter as well. And then they went out and filled out on defense with Port Moody's Parker Alcos, a Burnaby Winter Club guy playing for the Edmonton Oil Kings, and a big right shot defenseman, and then a big Swiss defenseman who hasn't scored much in his career, but already tipping at 6'3", 196. So we'll see how these look. The likelihood is it is going to be another draft with very few NHL games for the Vancouver Canucks. And that's just because when you're picking no sooner than the 3rd round and later, Those are quite long shots to make the National.
And you most
Hockey
certainly don't
League.
pick by need. You just pick by who has the most chance to be spectacular. Honestly,
Yeah.
to play games, because at this point, it's a hope and a prayer for all those players. So you reach for the stars.
And this is kind of why the Vancouver Canucks, the clock is ticking here. It's not just the Thatcher Demko and the Quinn Hughes contracts. It's also the lack of trade capital that we've been talking about. This is not a flush system. Right now, everybody, they do not have a single NHL game from their entire 2020 draft and probably won't get one. They do not have a single game from the 2021 draft class and probably won't get one. 2022, they think they're going to get games from Lekramaki and Elias Paterson, the defenseman, EPD. 2023, they're hopeful of getting NHL games from Tom Wielander, Minio maybe as well, the Seattle defenseman. But it could very well be another draft class of very few NHL games. They don't have any NHL games out of anyone other than Quinn Hughes from the 2018 class, although Jet Wu maybe still gives them an opportunity there. Tyler Madden was not qualified by the LA Kings going all the way back. So the race is on here because the Canucks just don't have a lot of young, cheap labor coming that is going to push guys on the NHL roster and replace them at better value in terms of salary commitments.
So let me ask you this then. Do you go to the scrap heap? Adam Boqvist not qualified.
So Blake, I am for
Columbus.
Is it 1.2 million this year that is entirely variable in the minors?
Almost 1.3, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm for every 1-year contract at that level or below.
Yeah.
So if Adam Boqvist is willing to sign a 1-year deal at 1.3 or thereabouts, for sure.
Terrible defensively, but he can move the puck around.
Got a bum of a shot and is a right shot puck transporter.
Had 11 goals in 52 games with the Jackets in 21-22.
Yeah.
Oh, a one-time top 10 pick, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Eighth. So,
there are a lot of guys, frankly, who didn't qualify, who didn't get qualified, who look pretty interesting.
By the way,
on those sorts of deals.
We talked about Alex Winberg as a third-line center option before this all began. He just signed in San Jose as well.
Oh, wow.
2 years of $5 million per. San Jose will be a better hockey club. They will be reminiscent of a National Hockey League level team next year.
And also, they had an amazing draft by most everybody's accounts, getting Dickinson with the 11th overall pick, and then getting Chernyshov, who a power forward Russian winger. Many had first-round grades on him. They got him in the second round, and then they turned around and took a Swedish defenseman that a lot of people had as sort of a fringy first-rounder late in the second round. By the way, Judd Brackett doing his thing again too at the Minnesota draft table. They move up to get William, the Denver defenseman that a lot of people thought could be a top 5 pick. Then the second round, Ryder Ritchie, the forward out of Prince Albert, who's played for Canada before. A lot of people thought he could be a late first round and got a mid. And then the biggest faller of them all, Aron Kiviharju, the Finnish defenseman who many a year ago thought could be a top 10 pick in this draft. He's a smaller left side guy, but the Wild selected him, Blake, 122nd overall. Kid went to the draft table and told Bill Guerin, I'm going to be the biggest surprise out of this draft, or the one, like, said that to Bill Guerin as soon as he walked up. You're not going to regret this. This is basically the Tom Brady to Robert Kraft, one of the best decisions you've ever made, sort of thing. Anyways, Judd Brackett continuing to do his thing. Former Canucks director of amateurs.
Let me ask you this. Ryan Rashog reporting, commenting on the speculation about the Oilers and the future of Vancouver's own Evander Kane. As of right now, he says, I can confirm they have not asked him to waive his no trade at any point. If he was available and they retained $2 million, and I don't think they deal in division. But
although new general manager coming there, right? So
is Evander Kane at 3 or 3.5 worth it for 2 years?
So the first thing I'd want to know there is the medicals.
Right,
Evander has gone through a ton of shit here.
Yeah.
So I would want to feel like I'm getting a 32-year-old who has the appropriate length of time left in his career, meaning, that he will be able to fulfill these 2 years without being a regular in the infirmary.
He played 77 games this year.
Yeah, but I think he played through some stuff, Blake, late that is going
certainly
to
in the
wind up
playoffs.
potentially costing him a part of or some effectiveness this year. But my knee-jerk answer there is no. I look, fine player when he's fully healthy and ready to go. Oftentimes isn't you got to be concerned on the chemistry there as well, because Evander has not fit in every room that he has taken.
Seems to be
Now,
less
when
and
you're
less
in a
of that.
room with a Connor McDavid and a Leon
That's right.
Draisaitl, it's a little bit different.
And as you get older, in terms of the fact that you're not scoring at a 40-goal pace every
Right.
year.
But my knee jerk on that would be no.
Yeah.
If you told me the player was going to be real, if you told me health is not a concern and that he's 100% ready to go for next year, start of the season, feeling good, looking good, nothing lingering, then I might have a different
Again, I
answer
doubt
for
the
it.
Canucks would be a target or a likely interested party, but thought I'd throw it out there.
Mhm.
Speaking of the draft, Yuri Slafkovsky,
Yes, he
8
just
years,
made bank.
7.6 extension.
Oh,
with the
really?
A lot of money
Wow.
for young Uri Slafkovsky.
Who turned it on at the end of the year?
He did.
But
He started.
a lot
Remember,
of
we had
doubts.
we had
before that.
Arpon Basu in here in advance of that Canucks Canadians game this past year, and he said there were some games that you could see the light bulb going on with Slafkovsky. So, I think he's going to wind up being a good power forward, goal scoring winger in the NHL. And here's the thing: he may not ever live up to first overall, because that draft just might be without a true first overall. Right? From time to time, you get drafts where you look and go, okay, who would you have taken first overall? Well, there may just not have been a first overall type talent or career coming out of that particular year's draft. We'll see. What a thriller at BC Place on Saturday. I gotta say, was at my local. We watched Canada draw with Chile, and really, there were a couple of occasions where Canada could have won, and there were also a couple of occasions where it could have gone the other way.
It was a mud wrestling match. It was,
Yeah.
honestly, this, as much as I love the stage of Copa America,
Mhm.
my goodness, it is not nice soccer to watch.
No, I got to say, there's been a huge difference in watching this Copa vis-a-vis the Euro. If you watch the Euro in the morning and then you tune into the Copa later in the afternoon, you're seeing some fugly soccer
Yeah.
in your afternoons. But I love the doubleheader we did on Saturday, because I finished watching the Canadian side, got home, then Caps got going. Give up.
By the
two
way,
quick-
on the Copa, I hope the medal round changes it, like elimination round changes that, because the problem is in the round robin, you're playing cagey. Draws are okay in certain situations. So you're not always playing for a win. Now that it's elimination, I hope the Copa America opens up, as the Whitecaps match did. Boy, was it open.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
You're trailing 2-0 to an absolutely horrible side that
After
had
12
left
minutes.
some of their best players at home after 12 minutes with a manager who they got fired. And yet the Caps come storming back with 3 goals, all of them from Brian White. We talked about how White has to be a bigger factor. Sure enough, he was. And now suddenly everybody's feeling good about you. There was offense. It was a fun game.
Yeah.
There was things going on
Wasn't
everywhere.
the cleanest game,
No,
but it was
absolutely not.
was
It's
a
one of
fun
those
day.
that drives coaches crazy, but fans step up and go, that was a lot of fun. That was great fun at BC Place on Saturday. The Caps are off to Minnesota on Wednesday, and then are going to stay out east, or kind of out east, and make their way to Montreal for a Canadian division rivalry game next Saturday. The Victory also vaulted Vancouver from 9th to 8th place in the MLS West, still with games in hand on everybody in their orbit. So it was good to get some breathing room. It would have been utter disaster to lose to a team that far down the standings
At home.
for a
Oof.
third successive loss. We also know that Ryan Gauld is going to the All-Star game in Columbus on July
Yeah, good for him.
24th, deservedly so. You mentioned the Copa. Canada advances. They face Venezuela. Canada advances with the draw because of the Argentina win. Canada is able to move into second place in their group. They'll face Venezuela, who win the group.
We talked about this on
As
Friday,
Blake
that
mentioned.
if that this could line up, that they get the on paper, the easiest of the quarterfinal opponents. Venezuela below Canada in the FIFA rankings.
Yes. Of course, Venezuela is probably thinking that as well.
Oh, totally. No, but they won their division. So,
well, the alternative for Venezuela was Argentina,
Yeah.
which they wanted no part of.
Yeah.
Right. And how about the Euro? England saves the day. Bellingham, added time, forces extra time against Slovakia, where Harry Kane gets the winner. And the English stay alive despite making Slovakia look like world beaters in the first half. I mean, we're watching the game. My dad's part Slovak, my mom's part English, so I was keeping the peace there. We're watching the game going, how many quality balls does England have to play to the box before somebody actually gets on one? At one point, they weren't even running to the ball. The English players were like crossing it into a sea of blue jerseys. Anyways, they get their shit together. They're off to face Switzerland. How about a Germany-Spain quarterfinal? Wow. That is some big boy footy there.
That could be the effective final. We'll see if the winner
the winner of that
that
could easily come out of that game. France has advanced here today with a shocker against Belgium. They score later. I guess it goes down as an own goal, and then survival 8-3 from Fleury from the Belgians. So looking forward to these quarterfinals at Euro, as well as the knockout round of the Copa. Shout out to Brent Lavallee and the Vancouver Canadians. They sweep Hillsborough on a 6-game homestand. Had a sellout. We were there on Saturday and had an absolute blast in the barbecue picnic area down the right field line. By the way, if you ever want to get together, a group of people, make sure everybody has a smile on their face for 3 hours, take them to the barbecue.
Easiest
area,
thing to do.
Down the right field. Or you can go to the left field porch as well. They get the food, they sit down, they're happy, they have some beverages, they watch the baseball. It's very social. Anyways, Seas have tied a franchise record here with a 9th consecutive victory. We said they got to get hot in the second half of the Northwest League season because then a playoff spot's available. Sure enough, that's what happened. So nooner today, well, it's already on or about to start. Home tomorrow and Wednesday. Rare 9-game homestand for the Seas. So you got a chance to see them. Kids are out of school now. Tuesday, Wednesday night. Get your tickets, CanadiansBaseball.com, or call 604-872-5232. And lastly, the BC Lions finally have a long week. The CFL schedule maker has finally given them
They're not even back to practice
off
yet.
and the ability to actually have a full practice week. They're Sunday in Hamilton. They are now 3 full games plus a lead in the tiebreaker up on the winless Winnipeg Blue Bombers. 0-4.
Wow.
Lose in Calgary on the weekend. So, I mean, the Lions went out and built this team to specifically get over the Winnipeg hurdle that they've bumped into the last 2 years. They may not have to worry about the Winnipeg hurdle very, very early there in the Canadian Football League
Still,
season.
That mountain's getting bigger now.
Yeah, no, it is. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. Poll question results. We've run a bunch of poll questions since Friday. It's been a busy weekend. Let's go with the one we asked yesterday. More than 3,000 votes here, Blake. With Gensel gone, are you confident the Canucks will improve tomorrow? Tomorrow being today, Monday.
Yeah.
Yes or no? What did the people say?
Yesterday, people said yes.
Correct.
68.
58. I was really surprised by this. My answer was yes. They were in this lane last year in free agency where you weren't sort of the biggest game hunting, but you had to find quality players to fill a number of team needs. I thought they did really well last year. So many people, it seems, had their sights set on Gensel, Tanev, and if we're not getting one of those two guys, Reinhardt, I guess, a little bit as well, although I think that was always mostly pipe dream. Stamkos maybe a little as well. So many people seemingly had their sights set on that level of player, and if the Canucks didn't get that level of player, it's a failure. They're not getting better. Chris, no, but I'm confident a lot of Canucks fans will claim the team has improved. Wow.
Well, no one's right or wrong because no one's played a game yet.
Dean, yes, but not as much as I think they need to improve. I hope they stay away from most free agents and explore the trade market. Ron, there's still some interesting pieces out there, but I'm not convinced any of them are must-haves. And then Lyle says anything will be an improvement over McGiff.
There's a bit of breaking news, not as it pertains to the Vancouver Canucks, but an interesting storyline that has been followed for some time. The NHL has announced that Stan Bowman, Joel Quenneville, and Alma Isaac are allowed back in the National Hockey League. They can be hired anytime after July the 10th.
Mm-hmm. Is anybody looking for a coach right now?
A lot of these jobs have been filled.
Yeah, so it's almost like it serves almost
one
like
more
announcing
suspension.
it now is one more
Or
season.
first
In
shoot a
season,
drop.
yeah.
First shoot a drop.
Wow. For Stan Bowman, it won't be till later in the season.
Right.
If then,
Yeah,
right?
it'll be
Because
next
general
summer for him.
managers
Well,
don't tend to.
Frank Saravelli is reporting that Bowman will be a top candidate for the Oilers GM vacancy, and he was on their radar when Jeff Jackson was hired last year.
Right.
And we've seen time and time
course.
again, the Oilers, they don't necessarily care about past transgressions. They'll just bring in players, coaches to
Corey
help
Perry,
the team win.
right?
Yeah,
Most recently.
Did he resign today?
Yeah, he just resigned in Edmonton.
Yeah,
and,
everyone in Edmonton seemed to think that.
south of there, Ryan Lomberg actually ended up in Calgary. A Lamborghini is in Alberta.
Grady was crushing really big on Ryan Lomberg.
Lomberg insider Grady Sass.
Ryan Lomberg wins the free agency. He wins the award free agent that most resembles an AEW wrestler.
Yeah, he does look at that. Yeah.
He's not quite the WWE level wrestler,
No.
if you know what I mean. He's a little small, he's a little short.
Or he's the fodder in the
AEW.
could be
wrestler.
WWE fodder, but he's not.
I could see him doing an interview with the Stanchion
NXT.
one day.
NXT, yes.
Okay, errors and omissions. I screwed up the number of players that the Four Nations teams were announcing on Friday. I said 5, it was 6. Jeff corrected me. That's all I have on my list, Grady. Do you have anything on your list?
No, I'm sure we've made some more today.
We've made a ton today, and
Yeah.
the listeners will let us know
Oh, they do.
what we've screwed up today.
And for those wondering on YouTube, we do a daily segment where we just look back at all of our mistakes and
Right.
hold ourselves accountable.
It's usually on the podcast side, but
Mhm.
today we're going full pull.
Everything.
on free agency
Everything's
Friday.
on YouTube.
So have yourself a massive Canada Day. Hope you enjoy the day. Thank you for spending some time and attention with us. We do appreciate it. Subscribe to our channels, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Follow on social, Twitter, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, 11:30 a.m. daily Pacific time, live on many of those platforms. And please do support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. Keep it local.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.